Greetings, math fans. All right, so this is another day of solving equations, trig equations. All right, again, a little bit more complex. So let's start out with an example. I got just a bunch of examples to do with you guys. 1/2 cosine squared of 2x minus 3 equals 0. Well, that was pretty easy, right? We're going to do 1/2 cosine squared of 2x equals 3 multiplied by 2. So you get cosine squared of 2x equals 6. And we take the square root of both sides, so we get cosine of 2x equals plus or minus root 6. Okay, now what do we do? Well, here's the deal, math fans. This actually has no solutions. No solution, baby. Okay? Because think about it. The cosine of anything, what does it have to be between? -1 and 1. This thing is greater than 1. It's a lot greater than 1. It's greater than 2, right? Square root of 6 is between 2 and 3. So since this is the case, this one has no solution. And that's what you have to recognize. Okay? All right, let's try another one here. Sine of 2x equals negative sine of x. Okay? Well, what are we going to do here? First of all, 2x and x don't mix it all together. You can't do anything with that, okay? You can't, like, factor anything out. Please don't try and factor out a sine of x because you can't do that. What you're going to do is you should recognize the double angle right there. And I'm going to write sine of 2x as 2 sine of x cosine of x equals negative sine of x. And then I'm going to move the sine of x over. So I have 2 sine of x cosine of x plus sine of x equals 0. Please don't divide both sides by sine of x and lose a root. It's very bad. Okay, but now I'm going to factor out a sine of x. And I get 2 cosine of x plus 1. And so now I have sine of x equals 0 and 2 cosine of x plus 1 equals 0. So in this case here, where is x equal to 0? Let's do this one in radians. We're going to be at 0 and pi. And this is cosine of x equals negative 1/2. And you guys agree we're in this quadrant and this quadrant. So my reference angle for this one is pi over 3. So this is going to be 2 pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3. Okay, do I need to check any solutions? Nope. I didn't do anything. I didn't square anything. Just manipulated that sine of 2x. Okay, so let's go for another one here. Sine of x cosine of x equals 1/4. All right, so what you guys, it's not a bad thing to do is you see a sine of x and you see a cosine of x together. Now you can't just set each one of those equal to 1/4. That doesn't work like that for factoring. If it's equal to 0, you can do that, okay? But you can't set one to 1/4 and the other one to 1/4. It doesn't make sense. So what I can do, and again, this is kind of a tricky problem, is this is actually really close to what? It's really close to 2 sine of x cosine of x, isn't it? Which is a double angle for sine. So why don't we do that? Why don't we multiply that by 2 and that by 2? So you get 2 sine of x cosine of x equals 1/2. And so now I can change this into sine of 2x equals 1/2. I've actually reduced it to one trig function. That's really nice because now I can, this is what I learned in the previous day, is I can kind of simplify things a little bit, right? Remember, how many answers do I have for this? Right, 4 answers. Okay, so the way I kind of set it up before is x is between 0 and 2 pi. So I multiply things by 2. And you don't even have to do this because we talked about this yesterday. 2x less than 4 pi. You know that our answer is going to be here and here. Okay, so the sine of what is 1/2? Well, it's pi over 6. That's my reference angle. And then, of course, this one is what? 5 pi over 6. Okay, so we're going to have our answers as 2x equals pi over 6 and 2x equals 5 pi over 6. And remember, 2x is between 0 and 4 pi. So I know I have four answers total, so double the number of answers. So again, I add 2 pi to this and add 2 pi to this. So I get 2x is equal to 13 pi over 6, and 2x equals 17 pi over 6. And then I multiply everything by 1/2, right? Everything here and here. So I get x equals pi over 12, x equals 5 pi over 12, x equals 13 pi over 12, and x equals 17 pi over 12. Okay? And those are my answers. Okay, didn't square anything, didn't do anything fancy, that's what it is. Now I want to show you actually a brutal way to do it. If you wouldn't have recognized that and you're like, you know what, I want to try and, let's see, I got sine x and cosine x. How if I square both sides? So this is what would have happened. If you just squared both sides, you would have gotten sine squared of x cosine squared of x equals 1/16. And then you would have substituted, let's just say sine squared of x, 1 minus sine squared of x equals 1/16. You could have multiplied everything by 16 if you wanted. Distribute that. So well, here, let me keep going down. We have sine squared of x minus sine to the 4th of x equals 1/16. Multiply everything by 16. We would have gotten 16 sine squared of x minus 16 sine to the 4th of x equals 1. I mean, I don't want to go any further than that, but I want you guys to notice that is brutal looking. Okay, that is just nasty, nasty, nasty. So if you start doing something and it gets really nasty, go back and go, oh, wait a second. Okay, that wasn't a good idea, and look for something else. Okay, so this, I'm going to write this here. This is brutal. Brutal. It's a different way to do it, but it's definitely brutal. Okay? All right, so let's keep going here. Um, 2 sine theta equals 2 cosine of 2 theta. And I want this one in degrees. So we're going to say between 0 and 360. Okay, well, obviously the first thing to do is divide by 2. It just makes sense to do that, right? So you get sine of theta, and we're allowed to divide by 2 because it's constant. So sine of theta equals cosine of 2 theta. Well, what do? You guys should recognize this and go, oh, wait a second. Yeah, you know what? I can change this into something all sine, right? Because I got a sine right here. So I get sine of theta is equal to 1 minus 2 sine squared of theta. Okay, and then I'm going to move the sine, or actually I'm going to move this to the other side. So I get a positive sine squared. I want my leading coefficient to be positive. So I get 2 sine squared of theta plus sine of theta minus 1 equals 0. If I factor that, I get 2 sine theta minus 1 and sine of theta plus 1. That's pretty sweet. So I get sine of theta is equal to 1/2 and sine of theta equals negative 1. So I think we actually did this one a little while ago. Sine of theta equals 1/2. We know we're here and here. The reference angle is 30 degrees. So theta is 30, and then the other quadrant, quadrant 2, it's going to be 180 minus that, so 150. And then sine of theta equals negative 1. Of course, that's going to be down here at 270 degrees. Okay, did I square anything, or did I square anything? Nope. So these are my 3 answers for that problem. Okay. All right, so let's try another one here. Sine of 2 theta, interesting, equals 2 cosine squared of theta. Okay, so once again, I'm probably going to do sine of 2 theta is 2 sine theta cosine theta equals 2 cosine squared of theta. Again, can't cancel it out, but I can factor. So let's move, we can divide both sides by 2. Let's simplify that. So you get sine theta cosine theta equals cosine squared of theta. So let's move that sine cosine over. So we get cosine squared of theta minus sine theta cosine theta equals 0. And I'm going to factor out a cosine theta. So we get cosine theta minus sine theta equals 0. Okay, so that's cool. Cosine theta equals 0, and cosine theta minus sine theta equals 0. So of course this guy here is going to be at, let's do it degrees, 90 degrees and 270 degrees. Okay, that's cool. Well, how do you deal with cosine theta minus sine theta? Alright, well, what I could do is I could square both sides. And that's actually kind of complicated. But once again, one of my students, Hassan Raza, he came up with kind of a good way to do this. He came up in 2011. I thought it was a pretty novel idea to deal with this, as opposed to kind of saying, gee, where is cosine equal to sine? Because that's truly what you have. You have cosine of theta equals sine of theta. Okay? But I thought a good way to look at it is, well, can't I just divide both sides by cosine theta? So that cancels, and what do I get? Sine over cosine is tangent. Tangent of theta equals 1. Ah, I can deal with that. Cosine of theta equals 1. Well, where does it equal 1? In these two quadrants, right? And isn't it our nice little friendly 45-degree angle? So it's 45 degrees, the reference angle, and then this is 180 plus 45, which is 225. So that's another answer, two answers, 45 degrees and 225 degrees. Okay? I thought that was a pretty novel idea. So once again, there are, a lot of ways to solve these problems. I could have squared both sides again for this one, but this is, you'd have to check for extraneous solutions. So if you cannot square both sides, you're better off, just so you don't have to check for those extraneous solutions. All right, so I got one more problem to do with you guys. It's a little complicated, but it's okay. So secant squared of theta over 2 equals 2 cosecant of theta. Well, let's see, what's a good way to do this? We don't really know any half angle for secant, do we? We know half angle for cosine and sine and tangent. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite it. I'm just going to rewrite this 1 over cosine squared of theta over 2. Don't you guys agree that's the same thing as secant squared of theta over 2? Because sometimes people want to flip over the theta over 2, but that doesn't make sense. You don't. It's like having an angle, 30 degrees over 2. You don't say 2 over 30 degrees. So you flip the whole thing over, and then this is 2 over sine of theta. And now I can cross multiply, so I get 2 cosine squared of theta over 2 equals sine of theta. It's cool. And, well, let's think about, we have one of our nice little friendly formulas for half angle, right? Isn't it for cosine? Well, first of all, I can write this as cosine of theta over 2, right? Squared. Do you agree with that? Okay. And so what I can do is, what is cosine of theta over 2? It is 2, and then it's the square root of 1 plus cosine of theta over 2. And then that's squared equals sine of theta. Okay. I haven't really, I haven't squared anything actually, right? Because already in the problem it's squared. So it's not like I even need to check for extraneous solutions. So the beauty of that is when I square that, I get 2, and then I get just 1 plus cosine of theta over 2. So the 2's cancel, and I have 1 plus cosine of theta equals sine of theta. Okay? What do I do now? Okay? Well, I can't just use sine squared plus cosine squared because it's not equal to, it's not sine squared cosine squared. So I'm just going to square both sides. And if I do that, I get, we did something similar to this, but I get 1 plus 2 cosine of theta plus cosine squared of theta equals sine squared of theta. Okay, and then I'm going to make this into 1 minus cosine squared of theta. And the 1's cancel because I subtract 1 from both sides, and so I wind up getting 2 cosine squared of theta plus 2 cosine of theta equals 0. That's beautiful. So I can factor out a 2 cosine of theta times cosine of theta plus 1. So I get 2 cosine of theta equals 0, and cosine of theta plus 1 equals 0. So cosine of theta equals 0. And if I want this in degrees, I'm going to say theta is equal to 90 degrees and 270 degrees. And I've got cosine of theta equals -1. Well, where's that equal to it? It's over here, isn't it? So theta is equal to 180 degrees. So those are my three answers, but you got to plug it back in the original problem. The original problem, okay, it's really important. So let's move this down a little bit here. I'm kind of running out of space. But if I plug in the original problem, let's do 0 degrees. 0 degrees is secant of 0 degrees squared. And is that equal to 2 cosecant of 0 degrees? Well, first of all, cosecant is sine. Sine of 0 is 0. This is undefined. So right off the bat, as soon as something is undefined, you can't do it. Okay, let's do 90 degrees. And that's going to be secant of 90 over 2, which is 45 squared, equals 2 cosecant of 90 degrees. So that's going to be root 2 squared, which is 2. And this is going to be 2 times cosecant of 90 is 1. So 2 equals 2. So 90 is a good one. All right, let's do 180 degrees. We're going to do secant of 90 degrees squared equals 2 cosecant of 180 degrees. Well, again, sine of 0, or sine of 180 is 0, so it's undefined. So this guy's undefined. So 180 is out of there. And then last one, we're going to do 270 degrees. So we're going to say secant of 270 divided by 2 is 135 squared equals 2 cosecant of 270. So it's root 2, right? It's cosine, so it's actually negative root 2 squared. And that's equal to 2 times -1. So we get 2 equals -2, and that's not true. So that's out of there too. So truly my only answer for this whole thing is 90 degrees. That was kind of a nasty problem because there's a lot of checking, and you actually had to know half angle and plug it back in and square it and everything. But the answer comes out to be 90 degrees. All right, so that's it. A lot of complicated problems, but you got to take your time, and sometimes you have to square things, but just make sure you always check for extraneous solutions. All right, that's it, math fans. Adios. Goodbye.